Wherever you go, your tribe will find you.
The reason why in relationships we suffer is because we are constantly looking for validation, because we are not validating ourselves. Emotions is the bedrock of self awareness. Because, first of all, we have to understand that emotions are just energy. And the reason an emotion is arising and has been given a label is for human understanding. Emotional intelligence is, I think, primary. We need to all be educated in it, that all emotions are welcome. Acknowledging, accepting, appreciating, and aligning yourself is the way to become unstuck. I am bigger than my mind. I am bigger than my circumstances. I am bigger than all my failures and my successes. Because there is something in me which is still able to step back and watch. Just this knowing that, one, I'm always supported and I'm always safe. I don't have to constantly allow my mind to make me feel unsafe.
Life flows like an endless ocean of stories. We often miss these precious tales as we rush through our days, too consumed by daily struggles to notice the poetry swirling around us. Yet within these stories lie the keys to our past, sparks for our creativity, and fresh winds to fill our sails. I am Abhra, a writer based in Melbourne, in quest of those stories with diverse voices that tell them from every corner of the world. Welcome to Stories and Stanza.
Hi, Preeta. Welcome to Stories and Stanza. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Abhra, and good to be with you.
Thank you for taking the time to talk to Stories and Stanza, and I look forward to hearing from you. And before we get started, for our listeners, could you briefly introduce yourself?
So, hi everyone. Uh, I'm based in India, and I call myself a wholeness coach. And I've been doing this work for the last over a decade. Before that, I was in the corporate world, and I worked in various different sectors over 30, 30 years plus. And there was a situation in my life which brought me to a point where I needed to relook at my priorities and my journey. And that's how I became a coach, because I felt that what had helped me could help so many more. And now I live in Goa. I live a very, I would say, a radical way of living, because one is, when one is aging, one tends to choose places where you are with family, or you're surrounded by known people. But I have shifted in the last 2 years. I've shifted to Goa. Goa is a new place for me because I don't really have a known community around me. But that is one of the things that I have learned in my own lesson, that I am quite fearless and make fearless choices. So moving at a, like, I am now 62. This is an age where, like I said, most people, and especially women in India, like to be surrounded by a supportive community. But I feel supported and I feel I have a community, even though I'm in a physical location where that is not possible. So I'm very happy to be with you, Obro, and to share, in your podcast.
I have this realization over time that wherever you go, your tribe will find you. I guess that is what I could hear from what you're saying. In my life, I have moved across from multiple places, and I've lived in boarding schools for quite a few number of years, and that gave me a flavor of all over India, different cultures and cuisine and communities and people's thinking, etc. And I thoroughly enjoyed that. Like whenever I went somewhere, I felt that that is home. So I can absolutely relate to what you
Yeah, so the
said.
only difference in that is that even I have had an upbringing in India where I lived across cities because my father had a job which took him to different parts of the country. I belong to an eastern state. I belong to a state of Bihar, but I've stayed there for a very short duration. I've stayed in other places. Most of my time, if I look back, I've spent a lot of time in Calcutta, which is in the eastern part of the country. I spent a lot of time in Gurgaon, where I was working, and that was my last long stint, so 17 years. And I have spent a very long time in the state of Assam, in the tea estates of Assam. So apart from that, I've traveled elsewhere. So those shifting were different because that was always with a partner or with a parent or because of a job or some purpose. This is post pandemic and post my personal relationship coming to a halt. Like I ended my marriage. So to sell your house in a city like Gurgaon, and I actually took the radical decision of only traveling with whatever fitted in my vehicle. And I drove. First, I went to Rishikesh, and then I came to Goa. And since I've come to Goa now, it seems that I'm here. When people ask me, "Are you settled in Goa?" I really don't know whether I have settled or not, because though I have sold my house in Gurgaon, so I have no other base. I still haven't purchased anything. I'm living as a tenant, so it's a different flavor to the shifting of a location.
Very true. And I look forward to be enriched by your experience. And I wanted to say that when you mentioned that how you became a coach, that is kind of a similar motivation behind this podcast. So I am a hobbyist writer, okay, and at the beginning of this year, I was talking to a few writer friends, and I used to record like short poems and publish them. And some of my friends said, "Why don't you start a podcast?" And then I said, "I don't know. I don't know have all the technical details, and it might be overwhelming." But I realized that people find it very difficult to promote their work. There, if someone is writing, talk about their book and share their things. That's how I pick the name Stories and Stanza. So you can be a writer, you can be a poet, you can be a creator. So what is the story that you're bringing out? And that kind of, that's how it started. So I guess we will have a lot of synergy in exploring the concepts together in our chat today. Now, Stories and Stanza, that was the like context of the whole podcast. But then I started a series within the podcast called Fail With Me. And the reason for choosing such a unique title is that I had a few difficult years. And when I was going through that phase, everything that I came across in motivational reading, speaking space, I found that that's very preachy. It says that you are doing everything wrong in your life and you have to do certain things to get it right. And I felt that I couldn't connect with that narrative. And I felt that, okay, maybe I am failing, but there's something my failing is trying to tell me. Maybe there is something to explore. So if I don't be bothered by the stigma of failure, and if I purely look at it from a learning point of view, I guess my most valuable lessons in life is rooted in those failures. And I decided to write about that. Now, the writing didn't happen as much, but I created this section in the podcast called Fail With Me, where I wanted to speak with guests, hear their thoughts about failure. And we looked at failure from different angles. So we looked at, like, in general, failure in life, failure in terms of wellness, in terms of mental health, in terms of emotional intelligence. So basically, unlearning what we know and look into our failures and learn from there. So that was the context behind Fail With Me. And that would be the theme we will be exploring today. So the first thing I wanted to ask you is that how does this concept sound? Do you relate to it? Does it resonate with you? How does it sit with you?
Yeah, of course, because the whole world has been trained to look at success. And in fact, it is successful people who you are told to emulate. But I remember many years ago, when I was listening to someone else's interview, they mentioned that uh, I think it is in Australia that when they hire people for these very high security jobs or very dangerous jobs, one of the first questions they ask is, can you share a story of failure? Because their reasoning for asking that question is that if you've been able to fail and rise, then you have it in you to make it to this particular very esteemed group. So similarly, belonging to a regular family, if you didn't fit in the box, like if you didn't pass all your exams, if you didn't choose a career which was approved by society, considered regular, if you didn't follow a relationship trajectory, at a certain age, get married and have children. So by that standard, I have failed at many, many points. Belonging to a conservative family, uh, arranged marriage, which is a very Indian concept, is the only way to get married. At least then. Now it's much more relaxed. But when I was growing up in the 80s, I came from a family where love marriage was obviously not encouraged, not approved. But I mean, it's a long story and I don't want to get into it at this point. But yeah, so I failed in that because I did not fit into the mold of getting married to a family, into a family that my parents had chosen for me. I'm married out of community, out of social structures. And did I have a career? So I was a very ambitious person, and as a young girl, and I wanted to do something, and I wanted to have a job. I mean, at that point, I don't think career was so much understood as much as having a good job and becoming financially independent. I struggled for that. And so from those aspects, I have seen many failures. Then not becoming a mother through the natural course. Normally people get married and within a couple of years, there's a child. But as it happened in my case, I wasn't able to conceive. And that can be seen as a failure. And it was for me for a long time, because people would look at me and say, oh, you've been married for so many years and you don't have a child. What happened? And everybody would question me. And I would also get defensive, not knowing any better. Whereas the reason I did not conceive was not me. The reason I didn't conceive was something else totally. But so those were initial aspects which, in retrospect, nothing seems like a failure actually. But at that point, of course, as a young person, I felt that, oh, I failed in keeping my parents happy. I failed in keeping my marriage, follow a pattern. So I disappointed a lot of people. And then eventually, after so many years, after two decades, when my marriage did not work out, that can be also seen as a failure, that, you fought with the whole world to get married to a person of choice. And two decades down the line, you are giving up. But I have never really seen these as failures somehow. I don't know. I mean, some inner knowing. But when my marriage was failing, that was a very dark point in my life, because I did not have family, because I did not have a child in the marriage, so I did not have anyone who was my responsibility. And both my parents by then had already passed on. So I, at that point, really felt as if I was alone in this world, and it was all dark for me. So that was my biggest failure, so to speak. Apart from that, professionally, also at work, there are many times you are faced with a situation where you're not able to perform as well as you think you are performing. So those were tough times, when from being the star performer for a fair amount of time, suddenly you come to an appraisal where you're told that, you're not matching up. And that can be a difficult acceptance, because what did I do wrong? So yeah, I've gone through those areas where I have sensed failure because of societal acceptance. And yeah, they've been difficult.
And now that you have become a coach, how do you see that part of your life?
Well, what I understand now and what I actually live by is, of course, if those incidents did not happen and those lessons were not brought in front of me, I would not be where I am. And is where I am where I wanted to be? Well, it is not something one imagined. Like somebody told me, do what makes you happy. In my decision to move to an unknown place in that sense. Well, from the traditional upbringing, what I wanted my life to be, my life looks nothing like that. I'm not surrounded by family. I don't have children and grandchildren, which my cousins have. So I see my cousins and my extended circle all having what is considered normal. So I'm obviously not normal in that sense. So I see these as necessary lessons to teach you, to move you to a higher paradigm. And I consider myself actually lucky. I feel, and this is what I tell, the tougher lessons only come to the students who are ready for it. So this is my lesson in this lifetime, I guess, to be alone.
And I'm curious to hear your thoughts and your experience as a coach. So, can you talk about some areas in your experience where you see people struggling, and what could be some of the strategies to come out of it?
So mostly, and see, we also, as coaches, we also attract the kind of clients that will help us grow as coaches. So my first client was a woman who was financially and professionally very successful, but was facing the specter of loneliness because she had decided to divorce her husband after two and a half decades of marriage with two grown-up children. So she was my first client, so to speak. And she connected with me only because she heard my story on some other platform. And she said, oh, you will understand what I'm going through because you have walked that path. And since then, I have come across many people, not just women, largely women, but even men, who face the same thing about the fear of being alone. That's one thing that is very common. And those who are in a relationship and are not really alone in that physical sense, but they have the suffering of acceptance and belongingness. I think these are primary. And of course, grief is a big factor because recently I've been working with a lot of clients who are going through some stage of grief. Either they have lost a loved one and they are not able to come to terms with it, or they are dealing with a situation where that is a possibility that they will lose their loved one and they are worried about their future. So yeah, so basically it all boils down to the fact that I don't have a strong foundation within myself. So I am always looking at outer support systems. So whether it is loneliness or it's acceptance or it's belonging or it's self, dealing with grief, it all boils down to the fact that my self-worth and my self-esteem is always dependent on how others see me and how I am connected to others, not solely for myself. I hope
Can
that
I
addresses
ask
your...
you that
Yeah.
the point that you just mentioned, the self-esteem and self-awareness, it's kind of rooted in our acceptance or our reciprocation in the society or family or whatever circle the said person is, where does that come from? Like, why are we not self-aware, or rather be emotionally dependent or wired in that way? That why do we tend to think that?
Well, unfortunately, that's the way we are brought up. That's the society has created that uh, template, and there's not enough challenge to it. All of us fit into it. And um, so, if we were brought up by parents who were not self aware, then we learned the same ways of dealing with life. And if life doesn't throw us down or life doesn't throw a huge challenge, we don't really learn. But I'm also blessed to be belonging to a community or a tribe where most of us have, after being beaten by life in different ways, have come to the realization that it all boils down to self-awareness. So when you are faced with a challenge, you learn. And unfortunately, this is not taught in our schools, neither is it taught in our homes. Hopefully, this generation, which is more self-aware, will be better parents and better teachers, and will make sure that the next generations are, actually, this new generation is quite self-aware,
Yes,
unlike previous generations.
feel that too. Whenever I speak with my daughter about something deep, then I feel that she is mature in ways that I never was in that age.
I
No, no.
also want to say one thing over here is that as children, if we said something wise, I don't think our parents gave us that space. At least in my case, that was true. I was generally told, you don't know. You're too young to know. And I remember as a young person, I was, I think, in my class 11 or 12, going to my principal and at one point commenting to her that my parents don't know anything. And my principal was surprised that I was saying that in whatever context. I said, they don't understand anything. I don't want to ask them. So as a young person, I also knew that in many places I was wiser than what my parents were telling me to do, or wanting me to think like that. But we did not have, the very few parents were open enough to allow the children to speak up. But whereas this generation of parents is more accepting and more open, largely. We can't generalize, but largely.
True. And that is something I try to practice as best I can. I'll give a very um, interesting example. Is that when I was in schools, I wanted to write. I wanted to create something, and I was told, "Don't do that." So neither my parents, my teachers said, "No, no, no, you cannot do that. You have to write what we tell you to write. You cannot put your thinking into the mix. Don't ever do that." And when I started writing poetry just for myself, and I realized that I'll have to unlearn a lot of conditioning. Okay.
Absolutely.
And it took me years and years of practice and unlearning, which is when I think I found my creative voice. And when I see my daughter, she one day was during COVID, she said, "Dad, can I take some art lessons?" I said, "Yeah, definitely." But in Melbourne, there was like one of the strictest lockdowns, and they restricted us to go like anywhere, and a lot of schools closed down, like art schools and things like that. So I couldn't get her to an art school. I said, "Look, it looks very difficult. So what you do is you keep drawing, draw whatever you want, okay, and then you will slowly find your style." And then 3 4 years later, I see her drawing and creating on her own, and she is like, she doesn't need anyone's inputs now. She can shape and she can imagine and she can create. And the same thing happened to her writing as well. So I feel that this nurturing has a big role to play in self-awareness. This is something I have learned in my life.
Absolutely.
I want to hear from you, because we were talking about the relationship space. According to you, what does this self-awareness look like in someone who is struggling with a relationship? Could be man, could be woman, anyone.
One thing that I have learned, and which I suffer from, was that I'm always looking for my partner's approval. And why am I looking for my partner's approval? Only if the partner approves, then I am good enough. Whether it is a skill or whether it is how I look or anything. What I have learned is that the reason I ask for approval is because I am not so sure of myself. And why am I not sure? Because my idea of my self-image is on how others see me. If I look at myself, my reflection in a mirror or wherever, I have to first like what I see myself. And not from an arrogant space of, I am the most beautiful person or the most handsome or whatever, or I'm the most talented, not ego driven, but actually be able to see and say, this is me. And I have to first appreciate myself. So I'll give you an example on this, because I grew up with a very critical mother. And my mother would make me feel always not good enough. And she would ask me to do things to make me better. So I always lacked self-esteem. Just to give you one example is, the fact that I wore specs from the time I was a young child. But I was made to feel as if, and in those days, I think nowadays wearing spectacles is more common than uncommon. But when we were growing up, it was not so common. Like, in a room full of people, there would be one or two people who were wearing specs, especially children. So I was actually made to feel that I had some kind of a disease because of which I'm wearing spectacles. And then, of course, you went the whole route of, getting yourself contact lenses and making sure that, people didn't know, especially when you're getting married, people didn't know that, oh, she has poor eyesight, and, hiding all that fact. Till I one day had to work on myself to tell myself that, hello, this is it. I have poor eyesight and I will wear my spectacles. So I actually consciously stopped wearing my lenses, because I said, I don't want to add an additional, cosmetic to my life. I'd rather be with my spectacles. So the reason why in relationships we suffer is because we are constantly looking for validation, because we are not validating ourselves. So the lesson that I have learned as a coach, and I teach my clients, is that if someone is saying something to you and you are getting affected by it, rather than putting the onus on the other person to change what they are expressing, you have to look within to ask yourself, why is it affecting you? Actually, I use a very silly example all the time. I tell them, if I tell you you have pink horns on your head, or you have a pink nose, or any such funny visual, you will laugh. You will take it lightly because you know it's not true. But if I tell you something which somewhere in the core of your subconscious mind you believe about yourself, or you're not sure, you believe me. Why are you so lazy? You're not smart. You can't do this. And we get defensive about it. What? Why? Because somewhere deep inside our psyche, we believe that about ourselves. But inside, I know how lacking in confidence I am. So if somebody points it out to me, it's like, oh, I've been caught. This person has seen my truth. So in any relationship, it need not an intimate relationship, in any relationship. And of course, there's a difference in intimate relationships and relationships where there's authority. But in most relationships, if we are getting affected by what people are telling me, it's because somewhere deep inside, I know it to be true. Maybe delusional, mostly delusional, but somewhere we believe it. So we get affected.
I hear what you're saying about self awareness in relationships. I wanted to link that to your ideas on emotional intelligence. We get upset by something that we are maybe delusional, we are not confident, we are not self aware. And when we hear something that is not pleasant, we react. Yes. So, one initially was one thing wrong. Now, with our reaction, two things are wrong. So as a coach, how do you guide that one can build emotional intelligence? How can that help build our self-awareness?
Absolutely. I mean, emotions is the bedrock of self-awareness. Because first of all, we have to understand that emotions are just energy. And the reason an emotion is arising and has been given a label is for human understanding. But basically, it's just energy in motion. And we also judge emotions. We say, oh, you should not be angry, or you should not be jealous, or don't be sad. We use these common ways of dealing with emotions. And but emotions are just energy, and so they have a frequency of their own. So there are heavier emotions, so like grief and sadness and anger. These are heavier emotions than acceptance and gratitude and joy. So there are lighter and heavier energies basically. The heavier energies is what we need to learn with, deal with, because the lighter energies are always, because they're light, they're fast moving, they're joyous. um, this is actually a very important part of my coaching, because I always tell them that to move heavy energy, we need to be able to first accept it. So if I'm feeling angry about something, or if I'm sad about something, and I am always wanting to deflect it, because that's what we tend to do. Don't be happy, don't be sad, don't be angry. That is what we hear from others. So we tell ourselves, we blame ourselves. Why am I always angry? Or I'm angry, I don't care. This is my expression. That is because we don't know how to deal with it. So emotional intelligence is, I think, primary. We need to all be educated in it, that all emotions are welcome. But if an emotion arises, and if it is a pattern, and the pattern has built up as a defense mechanism, as a coping mechanism, as a child in the first 3, 7, 11 years of our life, the kind of experiences we have had teaches us how to deal with all kinds of emotions. But typically, what happens is we see around us and we are told and we learn that. Say I'm hurt at a young age. As a 3-year-old, I got hurt. Now, also another thing we have to remember is that emotion is not logical. We try to deal with emotions with logic. Wrong instrument for the wrong condition. Logic is a different part of the brain. Feeling is a different part of the brain. So when we feel something, and this is what I have learned, and this is what I explain to people who are my clients, that if an emotion has arisen, you have to learn to feel it in the body. You can't process it only through the mind, because mind only knows logical way of dealing with things. But emotion is something which has arisen. I can explain it to my mind, but first I have to learn to release it from my body. So I do some practices and some techniques that I use, which actually allow the body to release all kinds of emotional energy. And once that emotional energy is gone, it's like, when you're hurting and you go to a doctor and say, I'm hurting, first thing you will do is put a band-aid over there, or some kind of a, ointment to bring the pain down. So when we are emotionally disturbed, first thing we have to do is not try and solve it in the beginning. So allow that pain to be felt in the body, released. And the practices are so simple that the mind actually balks at it, that it can't be that simple. It needs more work. But really speaking, just with some very simple breathing practices, some very simple practices. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with emotional freedom technique, the tapping technique. I use that majorly, and it works. It works not only for physical pain, but also works for emotional situations. So yeah, emotional understanding of your own, and why am I feeling, why am I constantly getting angry? Why am I getting constantly triggered by XYZ kind of, like, I'm dealing with a client who gets angry because the drivers on the road are careless, brings up anger in him. Now, it's illogical because you can't control them. Can you control all the drivers on the road? No, you have to control your response. And it's obviously coming from some judgment which was built up as a coping mechanism as a younger person. So we have to become emotionally aware of our own patterns. Why are we behaving? Why are we getting triggered with XYZ emotion? And same situation, two people need not have the same response. So can I then choose my response? So in fact, from being in a victim state, which is where we normally are, when we are constantly blaming an outer situation or a person for how I'm feeling. I'm feeling bad because he said this or he didn't do this or whatever, he or she, to moving into a space where we are able to say, this happened, but I will choose my response. I don't have to be on an autopilot response. It's like, very famously, like you press a button and the light comes on. So somebody triggers me and immediately I get angry or I immediately get upset or whatever. Can we create a little space between the pressing of the button and how I choose to respond?
A
So
circuit
take,
breaker of some sort.
yeah, yeah. So can I can I take the can I use my ability to choose my response to free me from this victim consciousness?
You mentioned something beautiful, and uh, I have done some somatic sessions myself, and uh, I am familiar with some of the breathing techniques, which I can. That's why I can relate to what you're saying. And you mentioned something very interesting, that when we get this surge of emotions, it's an energy, and the first thing we need to do is try to feel it in the body. And I recently read this on anger management, that whenever we are angry, our brain releases some hormones that made us feel that uh, it's a, let's say, coping mechanism, like a drug, like some kind of drink, that I'm used to that taste. It's going to give me that momentary relief and energy. Then how do we sense that in our body? How do we feel that surge of energy? It can be anger, it can be sadness, it can be any emotions, really. Is there a way we can spot that?
Yeah, you can. But for that, we need a little bit of training. So you talked about unlearning.
Hmm.
What we have learned is that for everything, we have to plug into the mind.
Hmm.
It's like we charge our phone and we plug into the electrical source. Here we plug everything into the mind. I'm feeling sad. So sad is a word in your head. And I plug into it. Now I don't know how to feel in the body because I have never connected with my body in that sense. So it needs a little bit of a practice, but once you start getting connected with how the body is responding, you will know that there is either a heaviness or a tightness or a darkness. There'll be a sense that when I tune into my body, one part of my body feels a little away from, let's say, equanimous. So there'll be, like I said, a heaviness or a tightness or a darkness, something I will feel. Um, Now, if I'm in a pain, if I already am in pain, like suppose I'm having a headache or I'm having a pain in my leg or something like that, can I still feel the pain which is from emotions? I'll answer it in two ways. One, whenever the body is having a physical symptom, which we know, a headache or a stomach ache or something like that, and we immediately pop a pill, we are actually dulling the body's ability to express. So first we need to be watchful of that. If my headaches or my stomach aches or my body ache or whatever ache or pain or any discomfort is a pattern, it has come from years of suppressing an emotion. We in the people who do energy work actually say that it takes 7 years for the body to start showing physical symptoms. So for 7 years, anyway, you have been suppressing a particular kind of emotion. So it's very deep-seated. Secondly, because these sensations can be very subtle, sometimes we don't catch it because we are so much in the head. We are so much in the mind. So yeah, it requires a little slowing down of the process. I also want to bring up the awareness that we know that our body has two nervous systems. The autonomic nervous system is made of the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. And typically, all our reactions are from the sympathetic, which is fight or flight, because we are constantly feeling unsafe. So the mind's job is to keep you safe. So whenever the mind feels threatened, immediately it goes into a fight or flight response. And when it becomes too intense, it goes into the freeze response. It just doesn't know what to do, it just freezes. So fight, flight, and freeze. But the parasympathetic nervous system is the one which is rest, digest, and heal. Now, these two systems, while they're working simultaneously, one needs to be off for the other one to be on and to work at full speed. Even when we go to sleep physically at night, unfortunately, our minds are still alert because we've created that kind of a life around us. We're constantly on alert. So we are never allowing the parasympathetic to actually come into play. So the body to sense and the mind to be there. Everything is well in my world. Let the body do its work. Let it heal, rest, and digest. So we all have digestive issues and we all have health issues and we've taken it for granted that's normal. And what I learned at a particular point in my life that how to activate your parasympathetic nervous system and how to keep the body, managing it like homeostasis is by doing some very simple practices which were earlier part of our daily life. Singing a song, dancing, walking on the grass, even looking at nature, walking in the forest, hugging a tree, drinking your favorite beverage with full awareness of what is going into your body, using all your 5 senses. Unfortunately, we've created a life where even eating a meal is quick. Let's finish it quickly. And we get kind of mesmerized by the buffet of offers that we have, and we forget to actually appreciate what is going into the body's nutrition. So these simple practices to slow you down, mindfulness is a word that is very commonly used nowadays, but we don't understand what it means to be mindful. Mindful requires the mind to slow down. And that you can't ask the mind to do. Mind is like, it's called the monkey mind for good reason. You can't tell a monkey to not monkey around. So the mind's nature is to be super active. It has some 50 to 70,000 thoughts in a day. Can you imagine? So we, as individuals, have to learn to consciously activate our parasympathetic. And the more we activate the parasympathetic, the calmer we will become. And the lesser we need to process so many emotions. And the body will be relaxed. And then the body is relaxed, even a slight pain will show up. But right now, the body is fighting with so much that even if it gives you a little signal, it's difficult to catch it many times.
Very beautifully explained. I remember that as a child, I used to get very angry, and I was told that it is physiological. It is something to do with my body, something to do with my structure and things like that. But it took me a long time to understand where that anger, that frustration, whatever um, negative emotions are there, where it is stored. And I'll share something very interesting, that as a creator, I used to feel that you have to be in pain, or you have to channelize your pain into creativity for the very long time, because that is a concept that goes within creators, that this is what you have to go through in life to be able to uh, create, to be able to write. And then when I gradually get to know about these concepts and started working on them, I felt that that is so not the case. You have, if you can let go of your emotional weight, you can possibly write better. You don't have to write from pain. That is, you should be, free, and then you can create anything um, you want to create. That's something I tell all my writer friends. I want to hear from you on the healing journey. We talked about a lot of things today, and very interesting, very important points. And what I have seen, and this is something people ask when they listen to this podcast as well, that uh, the life is uh, first of all, like you mentioned, like we are always hurrying, we are in a rush, we are not present in the moment. That is very true. And we have built all these coping mechanisms, that okay, I'll watch TV, or okay, I'll smoke, or I'll drink alcohol, whatever. When okay, uh, can I maybe just eat, binge eating and things like that. We have complicated our life, and we have built all these coping mechanisms, and we do not realize that in in a way we are the blockers for our own healing journey, to untangle that, to be self-aware, to be mindful, to regulate our responses. How do you suggest that, where do we start when we feel that we are stuck at so many levels and we are always coping? How do we break that cycle, and how do we come out of it?
So breaking the cycle will always come from when being stuck becomes painful, unfortunately, because till the pain is felt of being stuck, everybody just ignores it. So I would say that the first thing is that when you feel stuck, be grateful that you realize you're stuck. Great, because you may have been stuck from much before, but you were not even aware of it. So now that you know that you're stuck, great. At least you know you're stuck. Now we can work from here. One of the first things that I work with people and I try to bring to their awareness is to build in gratitude in your life. Gratitude is a great, I would say, pill. It's like a very necessary vitamin that we need to have as a pill on a daily basis. We are very good patients and we follow our doctor's advice on having this pill and that supplement and this supplement. The supplement that you really require is gratitude to start with. It's an easy one. It doesn't dig into your wounds too much, because others may actually bring up some stuff before it cleans. Like I was attending one summit today where they say that if you want to clean your house, you first have to admit there is dirt. And that is never a pleasant process. So building in gratitude is a great way to start. Even if you're going through the darkest time in your life, even if you can't see anything to be grateful for, and there are those moments in our life when we feel that, what can I be grateful for? I have nothing in my life. Everything is fallen apart. But you're still alive. You still have a body which is functioning to whatever level it's functioning. I know of people who have gone to sleep after a nice meal and not gotten up. I've also known of people who have gone to sleep and gotten up and not able to see from one eye. They've lost vision. And there are so many such instances in front of us. So I think when we feel stuck, whether it's a relationship issue, whether it is a finance issue, whether it is a professional issue, whatever is falling apart, we still have more of something than many others who may not even have that much. Like I remember as a young child, and this is something which has stuck with me always, I cried I had no shoes till I saw a man who had no feet. I can't even imagine not having feet. So can I be grateful for my broken shoe? Now, obviously, there's a lot of resistance to this, and a lot of people find this challenging. But that's the easy entry. I think that this is the softest way to enter this world of healing yourself, of first actually acknowledging what you have, whatever you have, however little you have. So I have a formula which I say it's a 4A formula. Like first, you have to learn to acknowledge. Whether it's your pain or whether it is what you have, acknowledge it. Acknowledge whatever it is. And then accept it. Don't be in a denial mode or don't be in a mode of presenting a different picture to yourself, not talking anywhere else, just to yourself. So acknowledge it, accept it, see what you can find to appreciate in that. And once you have crossed these 3 milestones, then you can come to the 4th, which is to align yourself to action based on all of this. So acknowledging, accepting, appreciating, and aligning yourself is the way to become unstuck.
That is very beautifully said. I'll write that down. And I think we are coming towards the end of our discussion. This is such a beautiful discussion. I guess we can go on and on, but in the interest of time, I guess we should aim to wrap up. But before getting there, you mentioned that your spirituality helped building this understanding and this self-awareness and mindfulness that we talked about. Can you tell us how it started? What resonated with you most, and what do you recommend?
Yeah. So I have never been a religious person. Even as a young girl, I experimented and I also thought I was an atheist for a bit till I realized that no, there is something. I mean, I can't say that there is no power. There is some power. And I came to the realization that I may be an agnostic, but not an atheist. So I always considered myself spiritual and not religious. But before the spiritual awareness helped me, actually what helped me was the understanding that what I am behaving as, my behavior, is because of some life circumstances. So I was actually made aware of that fact that there are 9 reasons people behave in a certain way. The behavior may be same, but the reason for making that behavior is coming from 9 lacks that we feel. Lack of control, lack of authority, lack of acceptance, so many things. So this awareness that I'm operating, I'm behaving in a certain manner, which is not feeling right for me. That's why I'm feeling stuck. If I was approving of my behavior, I wouldn't feel stuck. But I'm seeing that my behavior is not serving me, forget about anything else. I realize it's because there are people in this world who are behaving like me also. So I'm not alone. And that I have to learn to manage my emotions. I have to learn to accept and acknowledge and appreciate my emotions. That was my first. When we started doing this work with my mentor, I remember my mentor asking a question and basically asking herself rather than asking us. She said, this can't be the way to live life. We can't keep falling into one pothole and then using some techniques that we have learned to come out of that pothole and fall into another pothole. That means that constantly we are getting triggered and we are suffering consequences because we are not able to live from a higher elevation. So what does it take for us to live from a higher elevation? And that's when this awareness that we are not limited to just this physical body, our existence is not limited by our physical body, there is more to us. And that's when the spirituality of Advaita Vedanta actually awakened me to that extent, that suddenly I realized that, oh, we are actually looking through a lens which is myopic, because I am not I can see my mind, I can see my thoughts, so I cannot be my mind. I have to be more than my mind. What is this more? Where does this more reside? And the way Advaita Vedanta was introduced to me and what I picked up from it, I'm no scholar, I'm no expert on Advaita Vedanta, so I can't talk on it. But I practice it to the best of my ability and my best of my understanding. And what it helped me was that I am bigger than my mind. I am bigger than my circumstances. I am bigger than all my failures and my successes. Because there is something in me which is still able to step back and watch and say, oh, there I am failing. Oh, there I am succeeding. What is this? There is something which is deeper and wider. So for me, it was a very gentle introduction into this whole very deep philosophy of Advaita Vedanta. But I also have learned a lot from what Zen practitioners have to say, what Sufis say, what Gurdjieff has said. I mean, I've learned from so many teachers across philosophies. So I can't say that it's only one philosophy, but I find a synergy in all these philosophies. So because Advaita Vedanta came to me like a philosophy, but others were more, more general, like just through some sharings and some, conversations. But I have been really fortunate to have found the right kind of teachers in my life, I would say. And I suppose some inner knowing that, yeah, this is right for me. So just this knowing that, one, I'm always supported and I'm always safe. I don't have to constantly allow my mind to make me feel unsafe. Uh, comes from my spiritual, whatever I have plugged into. I can't, like say, I'm not a scholar, so I can't really say that I understand the philosophy fully. But what has worked for me is that I plug into this thing that I'm always safe. And if I feel unsafe or if I feel triggered by any situation, the longer I stay in the suffering of it, the more I will manifest it. So I have to quickly move out of it and say, hello, I don't want more of this.
Thank you so much for explaining it so beautifully. I think we have talked about the areas we wanted to. For our listeners, viewers, if they want to work with you, do you want to say something? How can they reach out to you? I'll, of course, have your coordinates in the episode description so that they will be able to locate you and reach out. But do you work with people only in India or do you work with people abroad? How do you work? And can you just summarize that briefly?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for allowing me to share whatever little wisdom I have. Yeah, I work with clients all over the world. I've had clients from Australia also earlier. Um, so the best way to connect with me is through a WhatsApp message, and my WhatsApp number. I think you do my official WhatsApp number. I'll put it. I mean, share it with you again. I'm there on Instagram as wholeness coach Preeta. That handle is there. The same handle is also there on Facebook. So you can reach me on Instagram or Facebook. I also have a website with the same name, wholenesscoachpreeta.com. So you can reach me from there. But the best and the fastest is to drop me a message on WhatsApp, because I think that's the most
Fantastic.
convenient.
Yeah, I'm sure
And I
that.
and I
Yeah,
and just want to say that I sorry, I'm interrupting you, but
that's okay.
I work with individuals, and I also announce group programs. So yeah, I work in both ways.
Fantastic. No, thank you so much for taking your time and sharing such beautiful words of wisdom with us today. And I feel personally enriched, and that is this whole podcast is a very rewarding experience to me. And I feel that, as I was saying, that I had a few difficult years, and when I came out of it, I felt motivated to talk about it, to share, so that anyone who is going through the similar journey, they can say, ah, this is not it. There is something better awaiting for me. So that was the motivation, and I feel blessed to have such wonderful guests come and join in this podcast. And we are making a difference, and I am amplifying their voice as well, so that someone who is in need can find that light, that beacon that can change things in their life.
Yeah, we need more people like you.
Thank you so much.